Hi, I'm Paper Pancake. This is a cast of Felix and my first game against Ziladon and Jon Vandar in the Crystal Clash Final Tournament that was held on the 22nd of October. I usually start out the games by taking a look at what the others are spawning, if they have spawners. It usually doesn't change what spawners I play, but it can, and I also figure that it can delay giving the opponent's information about my deck as well. I originally wasn't planning on casting the tournament. I originally was just going to upload my recordings, but I made the mistake somehow of not recording the game's audio, and so I figured that rather than have you listen to a silent game, I would distract you from my mistake by giving you some insight into what I was thinking or my analysis of the game. The middle fight went very well for us, but that's to be expected. Felix and I both played tier 2 spawners, whereas Ziladon and Jon are saving up for tier 3 spawners, and so we had a lot more units in the middle fight and had a little bit more mana to play with. They, though, are about to come out with a very strong tier 3 counter push, and so Felix and I are trying to build up a wave in preparation for that. You can see on the minimap, our wave and their wave is actually going to meet in the middle, and we don't want that. We want it to happen near our tower if possible, so our tower can help. I relocate back to hopefully have things happen in a more favorable location. Felix got their mulch digger to pop out of the ground early, which was really smart on his play. But then they teleported it forward, and so that ended up being a fun, interesting fight. They also, because of the way the spawners work, got a second set of tier 3 spawners very quickly afterwards, and this ended up being too much for us, and you'll see that we lose this tower. This is one of the huge advantages of saving up for your tier 3 spawners. They're using spells to support these units really well with Frenzy and Giant Growth. I made a call here to try to fight for the center tower, which was a mistake. When you lose a tower, if you've saved up enough mana, you can actually prevent them from capping the tower and fight back to reclaim it. That was what I was trying to do, but we didn't have anything that could stand up to that double pair of the Crescendo and Mulch Digger without a tower to support it, and so in hindsight I should have just let them cap that middle tower and come back at a later time. Jon and Ziladon are known for having quirky decks usually. They actually played this game more straight than I was expecting, I think, but their next game lived up to expectations. So right now I'm trying to get more charges on my Atlas. Atlas is a legendary the only legendary that can be played from stage 1, but it gets stronger the more often you play it, and so I'm trying to build up charges for the late game. Many of the tournament players were using Relocate more than you might expect. Relocate was still a really cheap card. I mean, it still is. Relocate is one of the best spells in the game, and so it makes sense that it's seeing a lot of use. After this tournament, they nerfed Relocate just a little bit. Again, still a really strong card and still definitely deserves a place in your decks. But the idea was at least to make it so that you couldn't relocate and play as many units in rapid succession. Jon and Ziladon are giving a lot of support to their mulch diggers, and it's paying off. Giant Growth, Frenzy, and Surge of Light keep the mulch digger healed, keep it hitting hard, and keep it immune to status effects. That healing goes a long way because the mulch digger dodges 40% of incoming attacks. In my deck, Atlas can also be scary when it's buffed like that, but we were having trouble in stage 1 when 2 of their mulch diggers would spawn back to back. Thankfully in stage 2 we have more options for counterplay. The building, the Granite Bouncer, has become much more useful than it was in the past. They buffed it significantly, and it saw a fair bit of use during this tournament, which was really fun to see and fun to play. Atlas and also the conductors that I'm playing through spawners both benefit when you spam spells near them. The conductors get energy and Atlas gets healed. My deck and Felix's deck are both fairly spell heavy to take advantage of this. This is a key turning point that you're about to watch. You'll notice that Felix and I have a lot of units that are near our tower, so we're in a zone that we can control and have built up a lot of buildings and units. Meanwhile, Ziladon and Jon Vandar just froze a slime near us, which I think their thought was that they wanted to keep our tower from replenishing its ammo, but all that did was it delayed us in a way that helped us. It allowed us to build up a wave while they were spending mana trying to delay us. Our wave has several crescendo, a strong tier 3 unit whose attack increases over time. It's common to use spells or units to buff the crescendo's attack speed or attack damage to make this even more powerful. On our side, we're using Frenzy, and on their side they have both Frenzy and a Crystal Chanter. Unfortunately for them, Crystal Chanters die quickly against Moags, especially in the late game. It took a while, but with some relocates, this wave that built up around that frozen slime is now ready to take down this tower. Both teams in this game are using the Frenzy spell. It became more expensive than when the game first released, which was needed. It was a god tier spell. Felix does a great job right here of making sure that our units have healing. Frenzy still is a really strong spell because status effects are a big part of this game and can often be fairly cheap, and so they get played frequently. Without a way to counter the status effects, they can just overwhelm your forces. Frenzy is one of the 3 ways to counter status effects, Monks being another one. Frenzy also becomes really helpful in stage 3 when we start pulling out Lothar, for example. Felix's deck has Lothar, spoiler. Lothar gives shields to nearby troops as he heals, and Frenzy is one source of healing. I keep playing ammo factories, but one thing to remember is that I still have at least 2 ammo factories that are further back near a tower that we previously were defending, and those ammo factories are still continuing to help us. Not only do the Moags take energy, the Moags start off with energy, so the ammo factories aren't going to be able to help the Moags early, but we're also using conductors, we're using root dudes, and those both use energy that the ammo factory can preload before they even get into the fight. This was a great relocate on their part. I had played Atlas to try to clump their units together so our tower shots would be more effective, but they split their forces. Now it's stage 3, and Felix has played Lothar. That was very good foresight on his part to save up the mana so that he'd have Lothar available right away when stage 3 hit. Now Lothar can serve as the vanguard for this push. This is a really interesting exchange coming up. They're saving up mana for their own legendary counter push. Keep in mind that Lothar takes damage from all the units around him. So these asteroid impacts of those Granite Guardians, like the first one was probably mostly mitigated by the shields that Lothar gives to surrounding units, but that second one that was a huge shockwave into the units near Lothar that took Lothar down very quickly. Here Felix was asking me to relocate our wave back. Unfortunately, most of them were still on cooldown from when I tried to relocate them before, and so all of our units went down. And then this was a big mistake that ended up costing us this tower. I played Atlas right after Felix played Lothar, and those two do not go well together. Lothar takes damage from units nearby, and Atlas is a melee unit that ends up taking a lot of damage because he does damage to himself. with them having the heavy gunners as splash damage and just so much damage nearby. My Atlas actually caused Felix's Lothar to die very, very quickly.
Solar Flare kept that enemy wave very healthy.
So now we're on the defensive. We just spent a lot of mana on legendaries that didn't end up having very much positive effect. And so, as a way to give us some extra space, Felix plays Bratu to tank some shots. I had banished units while we took down the Granite Guardian, and now our tower really helps because all those units are clumped up.
Felix sacrifices a spore both to heal our units and also to keep the enemy Avengers grounded in that clump. That Bratu was helpful for tanking shots and giving us space. The thing we need to watch out for here is for a counter push. Bratu's doing no damage to the units near him, he's only focused on the tower. So either the enemies will have a chance to build up a strong wave of units around Bratu, or they'll have the chance to save up mana and use that for a counter push. In this case, they saved up mana for 2 Granite Guardians, buffed them immediately, and obliterated our wave. They're now going to be coming at us hard. It's very useful in your decks to include units or spells that can turn the tide of the battle. For them, their unit is the Granite Guardian. For my deck, it's this building, Aegis, that I have not yet played, but I'm about to. It annihilates units in its landing zone, and it's a much better pairing with Lothar than Atlas was. You'll notice Lothar is staying alive much longer, and meanwhile Aegis is doing bonus damage to the Granite Guardians, has his Annihilation Cannon, and generally is doing a lot of damage. This card is apparently pronounced Aegis, at least that's what Google tells me. I've always been saying Aegis or Aegis, but Aegis I guess it is. It's nearly out of energy, and I can't play an ammo factory next to it because we still are waiting to reclaim the tower, and in fact are in danger of losing it if they are able to push back in time. Relocate to try to save a few things. Meanwhile, Felix has been saving up mana and just played a Lothar. You'll see it coming up. We're going to try to hold here. In this tournament, Lothar was very strong, too strong really. Lothar got nerfed after this tournament. As long as you can keep friendly units away from Lothar's immediate area, Lothar stayed alive for so long and did so much damage. I had played Atlas thinking it would tag in when Lothar died, but Lothar just stayed alive, and so now Atlas was in danger of killing Lothar again. Thankfully, enemy units distracted Atlas long enough for Lothar to take down the tower. Lothar just has too much of a martyr complex, sacrificing himself for everyone around him, even though he's the one that we want to keep alive most. At the 12-minute mark, we entered Showdown. Towers are firing at each nexus, and dealing damage as time goes on. They've actually done more damage because they were in the vicinity of our tower, which prevents it from firing. At this point, I was telling Felix we need to watch out for a Granite Guardian because our wave is getting stronger. But I wasn't expecting them to play it this soon, and I think it was a mistake on their part. Their impulse makes sense. They were trying, I think, to stop us from getting that tower and stop us from hurting their nexus even further with tower shots during Showdown. But by doing that, well, for one thing, it wasn't a coordinated strike. They didn't attack us with 2 Granite Guardians at the same time like they had been doing. But also, Granite Guardian is more of a reactionary legendary than an offensive legendary. In order to take back that tower, they would have needed to push into a zone that they didn't control, which would have been very difficult to do with Granite Guardians, in my opinion, without having reacted to a push that we had. That cost them another tower. They're trying to respond with their double Granite Guardian. They're trying to recenter themselves and come back. But they are also distracted at the Nexus by Bratu and a significant force that was there. And so their Granite Guardians didn't have the support that they normally have and went down much faster than I think they were hoping. They have their counterattack that was surrounding Bratu. So I'm getting ready to play Aegis, but I want to make sure that I do that in our zone of control. That was a lucky relocate on our part. They again were trying to use the Granite Guardian offensively, and I was
trying to go back to our tower anyway, and it ended up giving us a huge advantage in that moment. Lothar is a great legendary for offensive pushing. The monk near him is going to give him more damage than we would like, but because they just spent a lot of mana on their Granite Guardian, they don't have a lot to push us back at this point. We had got their Nexus down so low that it would be very difficult for them to come back from that. That was the first game. It was a very good game. I was impressed by how much back and forth there was.
Both teams were making use of all 4 colors, well, 5 if you include the Crystal Legion. Ziladon is sporting the gold skin for the Granite Guardian that he won from a previous tournament. As I'm looking at their decks, I don't see very many damage spells, so I'm feeling a little foolish for having used so many stone circles. They can protect against ability damage also, but I probably could have saved some mana and used it for other things. What did you think of the game? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you.